There's a protocol in every functioning government for the moment its leader is struck. The protocol exists not because governments expect their leaders to be targeted. It exists because the absence of visible, confirmed, unambiguous leadership in the immediate aftermath of a strike on a head of government produces something more dangerous than the strike itself. It produces a vacuum. And into a vacuum, in wartime, flows speculation, rumor, adversarial messaging, ally anxiety, and the specific kind of strategic paralysis that comes when the people who need to make decisions do not know whether the person who is supposed to authorize them is alive to do it. Iran's IRGC issued a statement on March 9th. Missiles targeted Benjamin Netanyahu's office. Missiles targeted the home of the Israeli Air Force commander. Netanyahu's fate, the IRGC stated, was unclear. And then, silence. Not the silence of a government managing its communications carefully, not the silence of a prime minister who is safe in a secure facility and choosing the right moment to appear. The silence of wartime media restrictions implemented on February 28th that have created an information vacuum so complete that the most consequential question in Israeli politics, is the prime minister alive, cannot be answered with certainty from outside the Israeli government's information perimeter. Where is Netanyahu? That question, hanging unanswered over a war that has killed 67 Americans in Kuwait and struck the Fifth Fleet in Bahrain and closed the Strait of Hormuz and pushed oil above $130 and fractured NATO between France and Spain and sent American tankers fleeing to Europe from Prince Sultan. That question is not a peripheral detail. It is the question that every government with a stake in this conflict is asking its intelligence services to answer right now. Because if the answer is what Iran's IRGC is claiming, everything changes. Let me be precise about what we know and what we do not know, because precision matters more than narrative in a situation this consequential. What we know, Iran's IRGC claimed on March 9th that missiles struck Netanyahu's office and the home of the Israeli Air Force commander. Iran has made operational claims throughout this conflict that have subsequently been confirmed. Ras Laffan, Ras Tanura, Jufair, the THAAD radars, the Hyatt Hotel in Manama, the bases in Kuwait, Iraq, and Jordan. Iran's strike claims in this conflict have a higher confirmation rate than Iran's strike claims have historically had. That is the operational baseline against which this claim lands. What we do not know, Netanyahu's current condition. Israel has implemented strict wartime media restrictions since February 28th. The Israeli government has not produced a verified, time-stamped public appearance by the Prime Minister since the IRGC's claim. There are statements attributed to Israeli officials. There is government machinery continuing to function. There is no clean, unambiguous, "this is Netanyahu, alive and in" command appearance that closes the question. The information vacuum is real. The speculation it produces is real. The strategic consequences of that vacuum are real regardless of the underlying truth. Now understand what Iran's targeting of Netanyahu's office means even if the Prime Minister is confirmed safe. The targeting of a head of government's office in an active conflict is not a tactical strike. It is a political act executed with military means. It is Iran telling Israel, and telling every government watching, that the decision-maker who authorized the strikes on Iran is nuclear facilities. The man whose political survival has been intertwined with the prosecution of this conflict since before it began is inside Iran's targeting calculus, not protected by distance, not protected by security architecture, not above the conflict in the way that heads of government have historically been treated as above the direct physical consequences of the wars they authorize. Netanyahu authorized the war. Iran targeted Netanyahu's office. The message does not require a confirmed kill to land with full force. The message is, we know where you are. We can reach you. The security perimeter that stands between you and our missiles is not the guarantee it was before March 9th. That message is received in Jerusalem. It is also received in Washington, in Riyadh, in Abu Dhabi, in every capital where a head of government has been watching this conflict and calculating their own exposure. And now look at the fracture. Because the Allied fracture that has emerged between Washington and Jerusalem in the wake of these strikes is the development that may be more consequential than the strike on Netanyahu's office itself. The United States has a priority this morning. That priority is an exit strategy, not victory, not the elimination of Iranian military capacity, not regime change. An exit strategy, a path out of a conflict that has pushed oil above $130, killed 67 Americans in Kuwait, evacuated tankers from Saudi Arabia to Europe, fractured NATO between France and Spain, triggered sovereign wealth fund withdrawal discussions worth $2 to $3 trillion, and produced Goldman Sachs projections with no clean ceiling. Washington needs this war to end. It needs it to end on terms that allow oil prices to come down, that allow the Strait of Hormuz to reopen, that allow Gulf states to stop the sovereign wealth fund withdrawal discussions, that allow the American military to return its THAAD from South Korea and its tankers from Europe, and its posture to something that resembles the one it had before the first B-2 took off. Israel has a different priority. Israel's priority is the elimination of Iran's military capacity, not a ceasefire, not a deal, and not a negotiated pause that leaves the IRGC intact, that leaves Iranian ballistic missile production continuing, that leaves Iran with the residual capability to reconstitute its nuclear program in 18 months and its strike capability in 36. Israel's entire strategic theory of this conflict is that the opportunity opened by the American strikes on Iranian nuclear facilities must be extended into a comprehensive degradation of Iranian military power while the window is open, while American military assets are in the theater, while Iranian air defense is degraded, while the operational conditions exist to accomplish what Israel has been arguing for years needs to be accomplished. The disagreement between Washington and Jerusalem over extensive strikes on Iranian oil infrastructure is where this fracture became public. Israel wants to strike Iranian oil infrastructure, the Karg Island export terminal, the Abadan refinery, the South Pars gas field, the physical architecture of Iranian oil revenue that funds the IRGC, that funds the missile program, that funds Hezbollah and Hamas and the Houthi operation in the Red Sea. Israel's argument is that without those revenues, Iran cannot sustain the military capability that makes it dangerous. Strike the oil, starve the military, end the threat permanently. Washington said no. Washington said no because striking Iranian oil infrastructure does the one thing that the American exit strategy cannot survive. It extends the supply shock. Oil above $130 is already politically unsustainable for an administration managing domestic energy prices, European allied pressure, and a global economy that is absorbing the Hormuz closure on strategic reserve drawdown. Iranian oil infrastructure struck means Iranian oil, approximately 1.5 million barrels per day, already partially sanctioned but still flowing through Chinese purchases, leaves the global market entirely. It means the supply shortfall that is already producing Goldman Sachs projections with no ceiling gets larger. It means $150 is not the base case anymore. It means the extended conflict scenario that nobody wanted to name has a number that cannot be said in a press conference. Washington told Jerusalem, "We are not striking Iranian oil infrastructure. We need to end this. We need a deal. We need prices down." Jerusalem said, "We did not start this war to leave Iran capable of doing it again." The cancellation of Steve Witkoff and Jared Kushner's planned trip to Israel is the diplomatic punctuation mark on that disagreement. Witkoff is Trump's personal envoy. Kushner is family. These are not career diplomats whose travel schedules reflect bureaucratic priorities. These are the two people closest to Trump in the diplomatic architecture of this conflict. The people who were supposed to be managing the relationship with Jerusalem through the hardest passages of the campaign. Their trip was planned, their trip was canceled. That cancellation is not a scheduling conflict. It is Washington telling Jerusalem, through the language of absent envoys, the relationship is under strain severe enough that we cannot manage it in person right now. The disagreement over Iranian oil infrastructure strikes is public. The gap between exit strategy and elimination strategy is real, and the people Trump trusted to bridge that gap have been stood down from the attempt. The U.S.-Israel alliance, the most durable, most institutionally embedded, most publicly proclaimed bilateral relationship in American foreign policy, is experiencing a fracture that is visible from space this morning, and Iran is watching it. Iran's IRGC statement on Netanyahu's office was not only a military announcement, it was a wedge. It was Iran calculating that the combination of Netanyahu's uncertain public status, Israeli domestic politics in wartime, and the U.S.-Israel disagreement over strike objectives creates the maximum possible pressure on the alliance at the moment it is most strained. If Netanyahu is confirmed incapacitated or worse, if Israeli leadership transitions under wartime conditions, the coherence of Israeli military decision-making becomes uncertain at exactly the moment when Washington is trying to impose restraint on Israeli strike objectives, and Jerusalem is resisting it. The vacuum is the weapon, not just the missiles that created it. The information vacuum, the uncertainty. The days of unanswered questions about the Prime Minister's status that fill the global information space with speculation that Iran amplifies, that adversaries exploit, that allied governments have to manage without clean answers from the Israeli government that is operating behind wartime media restrictions. Every hour that the question where is Netanyahu remains publicly unanswered is an hour that Iran's narrative, we targeted him, his fate is unclear, occupies the space that Israeli confirmation would fill. Every hour is an hour of allied anxiety of Washington, uncertainty of the specific kind of diplomatic paralysis that comes when the counterpart on the other end of the phone may not be the decision maker you need them to be. The cancellation of Witkoff and Kushner's trip lands in that hour. American strategy needs an exit. Israel needs an elimination. Netanyahu's status is unclear. The envoys are not going. The fracture is public. The oil is above $130. And somewhere in this in the information vacuum and the Allied fracture and the diplomatic cancellation and the IRGC's claim, is the shape of where this conflict is going next. Not toward the clean, decisive, bounded American air campaign that the first B-2 strike was supposed to represent. Toward the scenario that every serious analyst watching this conflict has been naming in private for days. A conflict that ends not when one side defeats the other, but when the accumulated weight of cost, American political, Israeli strategic, Gulf economic, European energy, forces a negotiated outcome that nobody wanted, and that the side which can hold longest gets the most out of. Iran is holding. America is looking for an exit. Israel is fighting the exit. Netanyahu's office has been struck. And the question that sits at the center of all of it, the question that the information vacuum will not answer cleanly, is whether the man who started this war is still in a position to decide how it ends. Where is Netanyahu? The world is waiting for the answer.